Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Sidebar Social. I'm Dana Stewart.
And I'm your co-host, Jennifer Grinke.
You are my co-host.
Yeah. So I know, Dana, recently we were talking a lot about, there's just not a lot of resources out there for parents and kids that are going through a custody dispute, just how to talk
Right.
to kids about the situation. I know you told me lately you do amicus work and
You just found that out?
yeah, I just found that out. But no, that you were looking for resources.
Absolutely. Yeah, because especially on my amicus cases where I don't represent mom or dad, I'm helping the court figure out what's best for the kiddos. When the kids are younger, like especially elementary school age,
Yeah.
I think it's sometimes hard for them to really vocalize what they're feeling, and so I'm always looking for a better way to try to get into their brain, connect with them, and that kind of ties into who we have on the show today. So do you wanna introduce our friend?
Yeah, so we are so lucky today to have Amy Tyson on. She is the author of two books, One Princess, Two Castles, and One Camper, Two Cabins. And she also has a workbook out. And so we want to welcome you. Hi, Amy. How are
Yeah,
you?
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah,
Oh,
thanks for coming
just gonna
on.
flash the workbook real quick. I know we'll
Oh,
talk
the
about it, but
workbook.
there it
Yeah.
is. Just show it.
Yeah, I love the
Okay,
workbook.
go ahead.
And so, can you tell us kind of a little bit of backstory about how you came up with these books and this workbook?
Sure. Well, first of all, I always try to tell all the professionals that I meet with why I have the passion that has started the purpose that I have, right? And so I'm one of those individuals. I've been through the divorce process twice. I'm also a former educator. And so I've chosen to take what I've been through, what I saw my daughters go through, and some of my students and their parents go through, and use that to truly develop resources to help other individuals going through this journey. Years and years ago, when I was going through my first divorce, I had two young daughters. At that point, I was a stay at home mom. I was very much used to teaching through books, and I wanted a book to guide the discussion of divorce. And I just didn't even know how to have that discussion. And so at that time, I reached out to the church I was a member at, and they actually had a book and loaned it to me. Long story short, I had my daughter's dad meet us at a park off in a treat area away from everybody else that we'd never been to, spread out a princess blanket, and read this book to our daughters that were 4.5 and 7.5. And it was absolutely horrible.
The book was horrible?
No, well, the whole situation, right? And
Okay.
our daughters hated the day, right? Which, child's going to embrace that day with
Yeah.
joy. But to make matters worse, I wasn't able to soften the blow, even though I used the book I was told to use. And I
Mm.
just remembered as a mom feeling devastated that I
Yes.
wasn't able to soften that blow. So years later, I had now remarried. Now at this point, had a third little girl that was 5 and had now left another marriage. And here I am, now I'm feeling like double the failure because in
Right.
my mind, I thought, who goes through 2 divorces? Even though it's incredibly common, I felt like a
Yeah,
failure.
very common.
But to make matters worse, there was this other pressure, right? Because my daughters that had been 4.5 and 7.5 so many years ago, at this point, one was about to enter high school. The
Mhm.
other one was about to exit high school. Still very much remembered the day I had told them. Still very much remembered the book, all with negative emotions.
Mhm.
And I just remembered thinking to myself, if a day and a book have this much power over a child this many years later, I've got to get it right. And I just wasn't in a position to even have that conversation at this point. I was in survival mode, like a lot of people,
Right.
Yeah.
right? So time goes by. I'm still not even thinking about having that conversation. And one day I'm in my room, and this is the honest truth. I'm folding laundry, and out of the middle of nowhere comes this phrase in my head: one princess, two castles. And it was so clear. I just remember stopping in my tracks because I thought, what? I just had no idea why that would come into my head, right? I
Mhm.
thought it was weird at the time. But it stood out so much that I put that phrase, one princess, two castles, on a little scrap of paper, put it in a silver box in my room, didn't do anything with it for months until it was time I could not put off telling my 5-year-old anymore. My older daughters had knew because we had already moved
Right.
out. But with my youngest, we could kind of dance around it a little bit. So at this point, again, I want a book, right? Former educator, read to my girls a lot. So reached out to her school counselor who did not have a book in her office, which I think every school counselor needs a book, right? A good one.
Yeah.
But she did recommend one on Amazon and I ordered it. Comes in. I'm home in my apartment at this point, alone. Nobody else is there. But I just remembered there was this pressure that I had to hone in and focus on this book because I had to get it right this time. There's a lot at stake, right? So I remember going in my bedroom, closing the door, going to sit in front of my nightstand, crisscross applesauces, as educators often say, and I'm just staring at the title of this book. And I was just put off is the only way I know how to describe this. And so I remembered saying to myself, Amy, you've got to read this book. It was recommended and you've got to get it right this time. And so I start to read through the book and I did not even make it to the end. I just shut it, went in my kitchen, I threw it away, and I went and sat down and wrote what so many family law firms carry today, which is one princess, two castles.
Wow. You just knocked
I
it all out right
I
there?
love that
All
story.
right then. And I did go through a company and I did some content editing
Sure.
along the way, but what I read to my daughter and the bulk of that story is what most people have that I wrote in one sitting. And when I wrote it for my 5-year-old, I was only thinking about her. I wasn't thinking about, oh my goodness, this is going to wind up in the hands of potentially millions of other children and parents walking this journey. I was only
Right.
thinking
Yeah.
about my own.
And so at what point then did you read that story to your daughter?
Pretty quickly, but I didn't write it and then immediately read it because there was this feeling in my brain, right? Oh my goodness, who are you to write a book, especially about something that is so important, right? And remember, there was that double the pressure feeling.
Sure.
So before I read it to my 5-year-old, I had some important people that I respected read it, right? And at the beginning, when they started to say, Amy, this is really good, you should publish this, I thought, oh, they just know what I'm going through and they're just, trying to make me feel good. We all have those friends, right? But when I started to hear it enough, I started to think, okay, what if I could make a difference that my older daughters and I didn't have so many years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when I started saving and really preparing to get it published.
And so what did that process look like from kind of the time that you wrote it till you got it published?
Oh my goodness. Let's see. So I wrote it and read it to my daughter in, I think it was January of 2019, I believe. And then it was printed and published and all of those things. It was, I believe, the fall of 2021. I think I'm getting that year right.
Yeah, so it took a little while.
Yeah.
It did. Well, you have to remember, right? My tagline for a long time was single mom on a mission. And it's very expensive, right? To get it, to go through a company and then to hire an illustrator. And I didn't want just any illustrator. I wanted somebody that did very realistic illustrations
Yeah.
and getting it printed. That's very expensive. But also, what a lot of people don't realize is when you hire an illustrator, or at least my experience and the way I did it, I'm telling her exactly how I want these illustrations to look. And we went back and forth a lot of times on both of my books. This is how I need the eyes to look, the nose, like everything.
So you could see it all in your mind.
Yeah, yeah. And when you're dealing with such an important topic, I wanted illustrations that, A, were very realistic, right? But that also would really draw these children and parents in. I didn't want what I call bubblegum type illustrations.
Amy, what do you think makes your book so much different than those other books that you had been given as you were going through a divorce?
That's a great question. So, number one, my books give a child's heart permission to hurt. Okay. We know no matter how we go about it, their hearts are going to hurt. There's a lot of questions that aren't answered. They often feel like their world is falling apart. So, it's important to give them permission to
Yeah.
hurt, right? But what's so important here in my books too is that it gives children's hearts an unapologetic permission to feel really excited about spending time with both of their parents, which needs to happen.
Yeah.
Now, I always tell people, barring any safety concerns, because I understand that's a reality for some families out there. The third thing about my book that really makes it different, there's a phrase in all my books and journals, and it applies to both parent and child. Things will be different, but things will be good. And it's repeated in all three of my resources, right? Because there's this natural inclination that, oh my goodness, it's different, so it's going to be bad. No. My resources help equip these children and parents to understand that different doesn't have to mean bad, and I'm going to equip you to help make this different good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What was your daughter's response when you read the book to her?
So when I read it to my 5-year-old, it was only on printer paper, right? There weren't any illustrations
No
because
pretty
at that
pictures?
point,
Yeah.
no, it was just she's sitting by me and I'm reading this paper to her, and she loved books and was used to, listening to stories. But at the end, she looked at me and she said, "Mommy, I'm Princess T, aren't I?" Because the main character is
Right.
Princess T,
Mhm.
and it's named after my youngest daughter, Tegan. And I said, "You are." And instead of the situation that I had with my older daughter so many years ago, where there were tears and all this fear, there was a sense of calm with a
Mhm.
5-year-old,
Wow.
right? Because I
Yeah.
painted it in a different way. And it doesn't mean that she wasn't feeling some fear down on the inside, right? But when you tackle things from a different point of view and you give them hope, a lot of times you're going to get a different
Of
response.
course. Yeah.
Mhm. So I know the One Princess, Two Castles was your first book, and then more recently you came out with the one that's more geared towards boys.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about why you wrote that book and where you
Sure.
wrote that book?
Yeah, well, and that's another great question. So, pretty quickly after I wrote One Princess, Two Castles, I started getting the ask, Amy, when are you going to write a book? With a character that's a boy, right? And so, what I always told people, number one, was at some point, I'm sure I will. But as a former educator, I can tell you that, like, we train our students in public school to make connections with the book, right?
Yeah.
So, even though the character can be a little girl, what kind of connection can you make with that character?
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, One Princess, Two Castles, it really is relatable for boys as well, right?
Yeah.
But there was that constant ask. And so, last spring, I started to write the book, One Camper, Two Cabins. But again, when I market that book and when I talk to parents, what I tell them is One Camper, Two Cabins applies to boys and girls, right?
Mhm.
A, you're making a connection. But B, I mean, I have two daughters that love to be outside in nature and do all the things.
Like Camper Caleb?
Yes, like Camper Caleb, absolutely. And so, really, it applies to boys and girls too. But for people that really want either a different setting, they don't want the
Mhm.
princess, right? Or they want specifically a boy as the character. This gives them, that resource. But it truly gives the same message as One Princess, Two Castles, which is things will be different, but things will be good, right?
Yeah.
I'm giving their hearts permission to hurt. I'm also giving their hearts an unapologetic permission to feel really excited about spending time with both parents,
Mhm.
which I'm a firm believer needs to happen.
Follow us and join the conversation on Instagram and YouTube at Sidebar Social.
To learn more about Greenkey Stewart Family Law, visit greenkeystewartlaw.com.
Amy, we'd love to have you read your favorite excerpt from the book.
I would love that.
Story time with Amy.
Yes. All right. So, this is my favorite page in both books, right? Just different themes. One day, after Princess T had lived in her two separate castles for a while, both parents had a talk with her. They told her how much they both loved her and that she was the best princess in all the land. The queen and the king told her that even though they had decided she would continue to live in two separate castles, those castles would have everything she needed to be the best princess in all the land. The queen told the princess that even when she wasn't with her, she could still feel all her love in her heart. The king told Princess T that even when she wasn't with him, she could still feel all his love in her little heart as well. They would still have lots of fun times, special times, times to cook, to play, to read, and to cuddle. But those times would be spent separately in different castles. Things would be different, but things would be good.
Love it.
I love that.
Now, okay, so I do have a question. The books are amazing. Have you thought about coming up with a book when now we have a stepmom or stepdad that comes into the picture?
I
Yeah.
actually already have that written and have for years, but it just takes time to
Okay.
fund the
'Cause I feel,
illustrating and publishing all the things.
yeah, because I feel like that's kind of the next in the sequence usually,
Mhm.
you know?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. What I really love about your book and what I noticed, especially as a family law attorney, is I feel like you chose your words very carefully, like the words that the mom says and that the dad says to the child. Can you tell us kind of like a little bit on your thought process on that?
Sure. So, number one, all of my resources, they do not use the word divorce. And there's two reasons for that. When I first wrote One Princess, Two Castles for my youngest daughter, she was 5. And I thought the word divorce was much too strong of a word. And I still think
I
that.
agree.
But when I went to publish it, I thought, okay, if I'm truly on a mission to help as many families as possible, we know there are a lot of families, they're not legally married, but they have a child and then they split.
Right.
And although I didn't walk that journey, I do not doubt for one second that that pain doesn't affect those children's hearts and those parents' hearts any different than it did ours. And so I still didn't use the word divorce in my resources. I think language is, not think, I know the way you use your language is so incredibly important with your children. And, one of the big things is not telling your child that you'll miss them.
Yeah.
And there's a natural inclination, right? To think, okay, well, they need to know I miss them because that means I love them. But you just can't do that because that puts an unnecessary burden on them. And I'll use an example. When I was an educator and was teaching kindergarten, one day I had a little girl come in and I knew her parents were going through divorce and she came in falling to pieces, just bawling. And I said, "Oh, sweetheart, what's wrong?" And she said, "I'm supposed to go to my daddy's today, but my mommy said I can't stay very long because she'll miss me." And I thought, this is a situation, because I knew who the mother was. And I thought, she's not meaning to say the wrong thing or trying to manipulate. She doesn't know.
Right.
And so I really feel passionate about helping to equip individuals with the right communication tools. So you're helping your child to feel loved, but you're not putting a burden on them.
Yeah. Is there a particular word that you would use when talking with your own child instead of the word divorce?
Well, I think it's important to just say, you know what, we're going to help you to be the best you can be, but we're going to live in 2 different places. And that's how it's going to continue to be if you know that it's going to be a permanent situation, right? I just don't think you have to actually use the verbiage divorce. Now, when you're dealing with an older teenager, that's a different situation. But I think the key phrase needs to include, we are going to work together to help you to be the best you can be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And you also came out with a workbook as
Mhm.
well. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the purpose of this and how it supports the book and the child?
Yes, absolutely. So the workbook, it's a journal and it's different than the books because my books are targeted for children 4 to 11, maybe 12. The journal is for 4 through 18. So, as a former educator, I can tell you, I firmly believe that children and even teenagers are more readily able to express their emotions through drawings than through even the written text, like writing words or verbally, right? You think about how hard it is for adults to express how they're feeling. Now you take the heart and the mind of a child or even a teenager who, number one, they're not fully developed. So, a lot of times they just can't tell you how they're feeling. The other side of that is, even when they can, a lot of times they won't because they're now carrying the burden of their parents' pain that they were never meant to carry. And so my journal helps these children, helps these teenagers to express how they're feeling, giving vital insight to parents, helping them to co-parent, and also helping to guide family law attorneys in these cases, as well as therapists and custody evaluators.
Yeah, because we see it a lot where the children feel that guilt of upsetting a parent or both parents, and they
Absolutely.
don't know what to do with it.
Right.
We deal with
Mhm.
that with a lot when we talk with the counselors for kids on cases. So the workbook is a great idea.
Yes, and when I market it to family law firms and then they choose to carry it like you guys do, right?
Yeah.
I always want family law attorneys how to instruct your clients how to use this so the children are using it in private.
Okay, so I love the books. I have one complaint, if I may.
Oh no.
So I'm curious, your illustrator has Camper Caleb's dad driving a Jeep. It should have been a Bronco. Okay. So that's my complaint. So for the next book, all right.
Big Bronco guy.
Okay.
Yes.
Can the step parent have a Bronco?
Yeah. Yeah.
They can, but here's the thing. So in all of my books, there's hints at our family in these books.
Okay.
And that Jeep is modeled after my oldest daughter's black Jeep that she used to have. Hers was a 2-door, so I made it a 4-door since it was family. But that Jeep looks exactly like my oldest daughter.
Really?
Cassidy's
She has a
Jeep.
winch on the front?
She did.
I'm-
She doesn't have that same Jeep anymore, but yes.
I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
To connect with today's guest, Amy Tyson, you can follow her on Instagram at Happiness in the Heartache. She's also on TikTok at the Texas Divorce Coach. And to learn more about the book series, check out her website, happinessintheheartache.com.
Amy, so on top of writing the books and the journal, you're also a divorce coach. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what you offer as a divorce coach?
Sure. So I took classes to become a certified divorce coach, and I also do co-parenting coaching. I work with men and women with and without children virtually and in person. And so what I do, number one, when they're coming to me, especially if they're just beginning in that divorce process. So I've created a binder full of hands-on resources that we use and we utilize. We figure out what their goals are in a divorce, and they're physically filling these out on these different things I've created, and their parenting goals, co-parenting goals, and figuring out what does their best self look like, because a lot of these people are coming to me and to you guys, right, and they're broken.
Yeah.
And so we've got to figure out what does their best self look like, and getting them unstuck off that story of divorce so they're better prepared for the business of divorce. Because if they're so stuck in this isn't fair, I shouldn't have to do this, all the things, is that they can't be productive as they need to be in their emails to you, in their meetings with you, and you may have a hot mess express when they're getting
Sure.
on a stage.
And even dealing with their children.
Absolutely. And so I'm passionate about helping them to create a life that they're going to love to live and their children are going to learn to love to live, right? And helping them to create meaningful activities to either repair a bond. Maybe the bond wasn't broken, right? But they're going to continue to build that bond, and to help them to reinvent themselves and communicate with their children and their co-parent.
So it seems like from your perspective and through your guidance with the books and even your co-parenting, counseling training, that even a very bitter divorce could have a positive resolution in the future. Would you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely. So you think about, okay, a lot of these people that have gotten a divorce, they couldn't communicate in their marriage. And so now they really can't communicate in
Yeah.
those years that follow if they don't put in the work. And it takes a lot of work, but they're worth it and their children are worth it. I think it's a myth that just because you've had a difficult divorce that you're going to have years and years of difficult co-parenting. And so you just have to be committed to putting in the work. And we really work on communicating for the benefit of your child.
And the other myth too that I hear a lot is, well, I have to co-parent until my child's 18.
Oh,
But like I know, we both have kids in college, that it doesn't end at 18. You're still connected to that other parent. So the
yes.
more you can do to try to repair and be on the same page, the better off everybody involved will be.
Well, and I'm so glad you said that because I very much do talk to clients about this and post about it. It is a lifetime commitment. Now, is your co-parenting going to look different as your children become adults? For sure. But your job is to make it as easy as possible for them when it comes to that family dynamic, because there's likely going to be high school graduations, college graduations, weddings, grandkids, all the things, right? And so why would you make that difficult on them?
Right.
They didn't get to choose their parents. You did. And so it's your job to make it as easy as possible for them when it comes to that parenting dynamic.
Are you able to share with us any success stories or anything that you've heard as a result of the books you've written?
Yeah, so I will say that the first thing that pops into my head is I recently had a family law attorney that is going through a divorce and carries my books. And this individual has sons and reached out to me and texted me and said, I just wanted to let you know that my wife and I read this book, One Camper, Two Cabins, to our sons tonight, and it helped our conversation to go so much better.
That's amazing.
And so that really warmed my heart. But the other side of that is when family law attorneys either tell me or I'll have individuals, will send me pictures of their children dressed up as Princess T. Some have done it for Halloween. Some have done it for book character day at school, because these books are books that these kids are coming back to. It's not a one-time read, right? Because
Yeah.
it's giving these children hope.
I'm going to be Camper Caleb for Halloween this year.
See, and you could be Princess
I would be
T.
Princess T.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'll pick you up in the Jeep.
Yeah.
Well, so if there are people out there watching that are interested in getting a copy of the books or the workbook, how can they do that?
Well, first of all, if they retain you for family law attorneys, you all have it.
That's true. We have them at the front. We give them to our clients.
Perfect.
Yes. So there's two ways that people can get it. Number one, you can get it from my website, which is happinessintheheartache.com. I'm passionate about helping individuals to find happiness in the midst of their heartache. But the other way to get it is if you have a family law attorney that carries my resources,
Excellent.
like you guys.
Amazing.
Yes. Well, we really appreciate you coming on, taking time out of your day to help, share your information. I think it's a great story and what you're doing, I think can really be impactful for kids. So thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amy.
All right. Well, we'll see everybody next time on Sidebar Social. Take care.